Welcome friends, this video is about cell signaling, and at the end of this video you would be knowing the basic meaning of cell signaling, as it's just an introductory tutorial. Okay, I'm not directly here jumping to the definition of cell signaling. I want you to know something indirectly which is related to this cell signaling first. So let's start. So we have two statements here. Okay, the first here is we all know cell is surrounded by plasma membrane. Okay, so what is the main function of this cell membrane? It actually separates the interior of the cell from its surrounding. Now why it does so? Because this makes sure that the enclosed cellular components, okay, the material that is the cellular organelles, they do not hang around here and there, so that they are fixed in their positions. Okay, so according to this statement, this cell membrane keeps the cell independent of its environment. Now you have to focus on this term independent, because we are going to talk about it later. We will elaborate it. Now the second statement here says that no cell lives in isolation. Isolation here refers to, that is, without getting any help from others. Okay, so that means for the survival of the cell, it needs to interact with other cells, or in other words, we can say it needs the assistance or the company of other cells. We can also say it needs to communicate with other cells to survive, or for its existence it needs to communicate with other cells. Now let's compare these two statements. The first statement here says that cell is a separate unit, and on the other hand, according to the second, cells need the association of other cells for its existence. So according to the first, it's a separate unit and it is independent of the environment which is present around this cell membrane, and second here says that it needs the association of others. So now there arises a question that, are these both statements contradictory to each other? Are they opposing to each other? The simple answer to this question is no, they are not. Now I want you to remember that term independent. I told you we would elaborate it later. We made it clear in the first statement that cell is a separate entity, but actually cell membrane contributes nothing in terms of cell independency. I say it again, cell membrane contributes nothing in terms of cell independency with respect to its environment, which is containing the ECM, the environment which is around the cell, okay, and that is containing the ECM, that is the extracellular matrix or other cells which are in vicinity of the cell in talk. Okay, so we can say the cell membrane never makes a cell an autonomous or self-reliant structure. The cell is not an autonomous body. Okay, so according to this, although the cell membrane makes cell a unique unit, okay, but it never interferes in cell-to-cell communication. Why so? Because the cell membrane makes the cell more organized by providing transport proteins, the proteins which are embedded into the cell membrane, like transmembrane proteins or channel proteins. Now these proteins, they help in moving the molecules in and out of the cell. So now we get a new term, that is the cell-to-cell communication. What is this now? It's simply cell talks to other cells. Now let's go to the next slide. Now we would discuss some very important functions of the cell. Maybe you are thinking now that we are going away from the topic of discussion, but trust me, it's related, okay, and it would make sense at the end of the lecture. So let's discuss that. The first function here is the cell growth. What is this? It's simply the cell grows in size. It gets bigger in size in terms of having more DNA content and protein synthesis, and then it divides to daughter cells. The second important function here is the metabolism and its regulation. Now what is metabolism? We all know it's the set of chemical reactions that are occurring in a cell. This is of two types, the anabolism and the catabolism. In case of the anabolism, we use energy to build products, and on the other hand, the catabolism, we break down the products and release energy. Now these two, that is the anabolism and catabolism, they contribute to the synthesis and breakdown pathways. And this, we must be knowing that there are a plethora of biochemical pathways which are starting from the carbohydrate metabolism, then we have fat metabolism, then we have nucleotide metabolism, and finally protein synthesis and its degradation. Okay, these pathways, they are highly interconnected. Okay, they are connected to each other, all these degradative and synthesis pathways, and these must be tightly regulated. If they are not controlled and regulated, there can be negative consequences. The third function here is the transport of molecules and ions from the one side of the cell to the another side. And it's because of these transport processes that we are able to achieve the metabolic reactions or the metabolism which we discussed in the last point. Okay, so if transport processes are not there, we cannot carry out metabolic activities. The next function here is the cell death. So at the end is the cell death. It is the death of the cell. This is when we are done with this cell. Okay, and we don't want it to be functional anymore. So here cell is subjected to apoptosis. Now what is apoptosis? It is a scientific term for natural death of the cell. Next, I want to ask you a question. Is cell so self-reliant, or it is so much capable that it can achieve all these fates or carry out all these functions which we just have discussed without getting any help from others? The straightforward answer is no. It needs other players also in this game. So let's play them. To understand this, let's have a look at some questions. The first question here is, who is ordering the cell to get these functions executed? Okay, so to execute some function, to carry out some function, there must be someone who is ordering the cell. Okay, the second question here is, if the cell is ordered, it means it must be answerable to the one who is in command, right? The third question here is, on what conditions, or we can say on what basis, the cell has to answer the command. Okay, so this is why and when this cell has to answer. The fourth one here is, what would happen if the cell fails, or we can say is unable to deliver the response for whatever it is asked for, we can say. Now the answer to all these questions is common, that is cell to cell communication. I hope you remember what is this. It's cell talking to other cells. Something like one cell says to another cell, "Pring pring, there is a message for you," something like that. Okay, now how cells communicate with other cells? So there are certain ways for them. It can be like a cell is present very near to the cell. Okay, sometimes the cell is distant, and sometimes we can also say the cell communicates with itself. So these are the ways about which we will talk in the next video. I hope this lecture would be beneficial for you. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more videos. Thank you.